and that's for the prohibiting the use of generative artificial intelligence to create false representations of candidates. And I'll have Jason give us a bill brief as a reminder.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Bill 375 would prohibit the use of generative artificial intelligence or other similar technology to alter the appearance, action, or speech of a candidate or an elected state official. This is a bill that amends two statutes. The first, 25-2407, is the general election crime of engaging in corrupt political advertising. The bill would prohibit the use of this technology to alter the appearance, action, or speech of a candidate or an elected state official. The other statute is 25-4156 inside the Campaign Finance Act, and this would amendment would establish the same prohibition, but with only with respect to candidates for election, and those violations would generally be governed by the Governmental Ethics Commission.
Committee, any questions? Senator Reichman.
Thank you very much. I guess this would be for Jason. I can't remember. Is there any other states that pass anything like this? Do you know?
I'm not aware. Do you know?
Elena.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator, I believe it's 5 other states that have enacted legislation. I'll have to double check that. It might be more. From what I can recall, it's 5. And then at least 24 states have pending legislation this session, including Kansas.
All right. Thank you.
Senator Longbine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was there a House mirror on this? Do you know what the number of it was or what the result of it was?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2559 was introduced on the House side. It was heard and amended in the Committee on Elections in the House and went to the House floor, but did not pass before the turnaround deadline.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, are there any amendments? I believe we might have at least one. Jason, if you want to. Oh, you've got 2? Okay. Senator Straub's amendment then. Thank you, sir. And Senator Straub, would you like to explain or have Jason explain?
If you would just go ahead and have Jason explain, please.
Okay. Jason?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the amendment I was just handed out would amend the penalty provisions with respect to the change on the Campaign Finance Act so that in addition to or in lieu of any other penalty that the Governmental Ethics Commission can impose pursuant to the Campaign Finance Act for corrupt political advertising, for the violation as specified with the use of synthetic media to alter the appearance, action, or speech of a candidate, the Commission could issue an order prohibiting the offender from engaging in any activities that are governed by the Campaign Finance Act for a period of not more than 10 years from the date the order is issued.
Committee, any questions? Senator Longbine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, could you define person for me in this amendment?
It would be either an individual or the organization that was found by the Commission to have violated the statute.
Would include acts or organizations, not an individual?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Straub, comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had originally requested this amendment because a fine of $1,000 or even $2,000 is really not punitive to organizations that are spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on advertising, on false advertising. So I think this goes a lot further in prohibiting the practice of fraudulent advertising. Thank you.
Senator Holscher.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would add, I worked in advertising actually for a couple of decades and would say that I was astounded when I crossed over from advertising to the political realm in terms of the lack of rules and regulations in the political realm versus the commercial realm. Something like this actually puts us closer to what is in the commercial realm in terms of rules and regulations. We still lack quite a bit in the political realm in terms of rules and regulations. So I do support this amendment.
Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with this amendment, would this be off of like a first-time offense to breaking this, or, yeah?
Jason, if you could answer that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, there's no reference in the amendment to which, how many offenses would need to be committed. It is solely within the discretion of the commission as to whether or not to issue such an order, and the number of years that order would apply is also within the discretion of the commission, but not to exceed 10 years.
All right.
So, okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the commission has that freedom to decide then based on maybe the severity as far as up to 10 years, first-time offense?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Senator Straub and then Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Currently, the Ethics Commission has the authority to investigate campaign finance and all other activities surrounding political campaigns. So this really isn't much of a change of the party that's overseeing campaign finance and campaign advertising.
Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm just not quite sure, how did you come up with the 10 years? And what was was it before it was like $1,000, or I can't remember the change, how much of a change this amendment would do to the bill? Thank you.
Senator Straub, if you'd like to answer that. Or if Jason, I don't know which one. Jason, I don't know if you had the answer to that. Internet issues. Oh, Senator Straub, if you'd like to answer that, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can answer why 10 years, because the revisor told me that 20 was too punitive. To really stop the activity, which is what we're trying to do, you have to make it so that the organizations, and this, mind you, this is mostly not coming from individual campaigns. It's coming from PACs and organizations that pump hundreds of thousands of dollars into different campaigns. And oftentimes when constituents receive mailers that may have AI-generated images on them, it's not clear where those mailers are coming from. In fact, I've run for office many times, and different organizations have played in my campaign that I never requested them to, and they send out mailers against my opponent that I had nothing to do with and I never would have authorized. And so it's the organizations that are bad players that we're trying to stop from doing this. So that's the reason for 10 years is originally I wanted 20.
Senator Cluse.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, Chase, I'm sorry, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I think I understand the intent of the amendment, I'm questioning, maybe the revisor can help me. 10 years, I mean, could this be potentially a violation of free speech, gagging someone from 10 years from participating in campaigns in general? Because if it says engaging in activities that are governed by the Campaign Finance Act, does that mean contributions? Does that mean participating in just walking, volunteering, getting support for candidates who might be writing buying you a meal because you're walking or participating in the process? So I'm just curious if a 10 years, is there anything in current law that allows the campaign or the Ethics Commission to do that, or is there any jurisprudence across the country that allows a 10-year delay in campaign activities or speech type related activities?
Jason?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, first I will point out that under current law, the fines that could be levied by the commission are $5,000 for a first violation, $10,000 for a second, and $15,000 for a third and subsequent violation. And there is a limit on the number of occurrences of a violation. So there is a cap on the amount that the commission could fine when it finds a violation. I do not know of any, there is no other provision under Kansas state law, and I do not know of another state that imposes a ban on campaign activities. There is an argument that such a ban would be a violation of the individual organization's First Amendment free speech rights, so that would potentially be challenged in a court if it were enacted and imposed. But I don't know of any similar penalty that's been enacted.
Senator Cluse?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just maybe for a follow-up there, Jason. So what would be, with the current statute and with the commission, what would be the stop then if you did have a big super PAC? I mean, could they ultimately, if they're well-funded, just keep on and on? I mean, is there a stop there?
The Campaign Finance Act does have criminal penalties as well as the financial penalties that can be imposed by the commission, but it would be a repeated assessment of violations by the commission against the offender for violations that are repeated.
If I can, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to navigate the 10 years. I like the fact that the commission makes the determination of, excuse me, up to, but what would the criminal side look like? I mean, is there something?
I believe the criminal penalties are fairly low level and would likely result in more criminal fines, criminal penalties being ordered by the court.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Faustiado?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Jason, just clarification to Senator Blasey's question. So, to your understanding, one could still do all of those other campaigning activities, and so this is just pertaining to making those false ads.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, the amendment proposes that the commission could order the offender to not engage in any activities that are governed by the Campaign Finance Act, which would include making contributions, actively campaigning, things of that sort, not just the prohibited conduct under the underlying bill.
But it does say may, and so I'm guessing that 10 years, and that's your maximum, and there's a spectrum of things that could happen. Anything below that, say that's just limiting for 5 years or limiting certain types of engagement. It sounds like the Ethics Commission has a lot of latitude there. Is that how you would read this?
Mr. Chairman, the commission certainly has discretion as to whether or not to issue an order and for the duration of period that the order is in effect. It could be argued that that the commission would also have some discretion as to which activities are prohibited under the order. It's not clear from the amendment, but I could see an argument for the commission having that discretion as well.
Committee, any other, Senator Reitman and then Senator Cluse.
Thank you very much. I understand, believe why they're bringing the amendment. I'm going to vote against the amendment. I think it's two things. I think it might kill the bill. I think it's a good bill. I think it's too harsh, and I think that there is could be some problems down the line as far as the constitutional or the First Amendment rights. And also, I don't like to have the Ethics Commission have that much power. So with all those reasons, I'll be a no. Thank you.
Senator Cluse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I do understand the carrier of the amendment's concerns. But just this whole subject is so new to all of us, and I am a little concerned with the 10-year. I don't know if the carrier of the amendment would consider a substitution amendment like 5 years.
Senator Straub, I couldn't hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I said I would consider 5 years if that makes it more palatable to the committee.
Is it a conceptual substitute amendment? Any discussion on, so are you making that motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would amend my original amendment to 5 years instead of 10 years on the last line in the amendment in the B, I guess.
Yeah, in the balloon amendment B.
Yes.
Okay. Everyone understand, committee? Any other discussion on that? Seeing none, do you move your amendment, substitute amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move my amendment.
Okay. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Cluse. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment appears to fail. So we move on back to the bill. I believe there's a second amendment. Thank you, sir. And Jason, explain the amendment, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this amendment proposes changes to both statute to clarify who would be liable for violations related to the use of the synthetic media. And the amendments appear on pages 2 and 5 of the bill. State that the responsibility for those disclosures that are required, as well as any liability for failure to make those disclosures, would rest solely with the creator or producer of the advertisement or communication, and not with the broadcaster or other media platform or carrier that is disseminating the advertisement or communication. And that would apply both with the general election crime and with the Campaign Finance Act statute.
Okay. Questions, Senator Fasquedo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Jason, so then if I hired someone to create that ad, the penalty would go to me and not them, and how would we determine that or prove that? Or
No, Jason, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I believe the intent of the amendment is to place liability on the individual or organization that paid for or created the false advertisement, and to absolve the broadcast media from liability.
And then Senator Holscher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just further clarification on that, Jason. So if a candidate or a PAC hires a campaign company or they hire a printer to print a postcard, does the liability fall on the poor guy that's the graphic designer working for that company that creates the card, even though he was told by superiors, here's what we want? Maybe the candidate told the campaign company what they wanted, and this poor guy is a graphic designer that's doing what his boss told him to do. So where does that liability fall?
Jason?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the decision on which party to prosecute for a violation is largely going to lie with the prosecutor or the commission. And most prosecutions in this instance, they would most likely target the entity that paid for the advertisement and requested the advertisement, and not necessarily the employee who may have created the communication. But again, that's going to be down to more the specifics of the case and the prosecutorial intent of the commission or the district attorney.
Senator Holscher?
And I'll jump in here too. In these types of cases, as Jason indicated, the entity that paid for is typically where the fault lies. You would hope, that the agency or whoever is hired would know the rules, because that is the arena that, in the business that they're operating in, that they should know the rules, but then ultimately responsibility does fall on the entity that paid for typically.
Any other question?
And I'm sorry, I would mention this is needed because often publishers receive things at the very last minute and can't control the content that's in it, because typically at this stage of how things are produced, things are being submitted camera ready or copy ready digitally without any time frame for a publisher to check to see the origination.
Senator Straub?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 2, lines 22 through 24 in the bill, I think we're all missing the point that this doesn't completely stop fraudulent political advertising. And that subsection says it is an affirmative defense that the communication containing synthetic media includes a disclosure stating this image, video, or audio has been manipulated. So I think they can protect themselves, but with a disclosure that states that they manipulated the image, correct? That's for the revisor.
Yes, that is correct. That's an affirmative defense to a violation.
So if it was in tiny, tiny fine print on a broadcast that flashes up on the screen for 2 seconds, which is often the case, then that would absolve them of any wrongdoing. Is that how you see that, Jason?
Mr. Chairman, the bill actually describes the requirements for the disclosures in lines 25 through 30, so that for visual media, the disclosure must appear in a font size that is easily readable to the average viewer and not smaller than the largest font size of other text that is appearing in the visual media. And it must appear for the duration of the video.
Oh, okay, so if it were a 30-second spot on television, it'd have to be font large enough to read and on for the entire 30-second spot.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, do I have a motion to move this amendment? I do not. Senator Holscher? Senator Holscher moves or makes a motion for the amendment. Do I have a second? Second by Senator Blasey. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment carries. We are back on the base bill. Are there any other amendments or discussion? Senator Clues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just trying to go back a minute here. I do feel like this current bill doesn't give enough penalty. I realize, I can just look at my own campaign. Things can get ugly at times, and we can see how people will attack, how PACs will attack, and so I don't know. Maybe if the committee would consider the Straub amendment with 2 years discussion.
Is that your motion? Or Senator Blasey, if you'd like to discuss first.
Mr. Chairman, as we heard this bill, and then we've been debating this bill and talking about this bill, I just kind of have pause, and as I think most of the committee does, based on the silence of just votes that have been cast on amendments, this bill, it seems to be a really big issue that we're trying to rush through in an election year, but artificial intelligence is something that is so new to this arena, and so many states are trying to tackle this issue. I'm wondering if we should just pause and really dive into this issue more, maybe creating a subcommittee or creating an interim committee during the interim, but something to really dive into this. What we don't want is create legislation and law that could be consequential to the political process, while at the same time we also want to ensure we're appropriately, as Senator Clues mentioned, putting safeguards in place and correcting action that is not appropriate. So I think my position at this point is just to pause and not move forward with this bill in its current form. And just in general, the discussion I just think needs a lot more merit, a lot more conversation, as all the states are trying to tackle this issue, and we need to learn from other states and see what they have done to succeed or fail.
Would you make a motion, I guess, to table the bill for the,
I will just leave that at your discretion if you feel like the committee wishes to do so.
any further discussion? Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify that in any type of punitive action, the Ethics Commission has the authority to investigate it and decide on the punishment. And that 10 years in the original amendment was just of not more than, like that's like the max penalty. I don't think that the Ethics Commission currently has the power to stop some of the shady campaign practices, both financial and advertising. I think all of us sign an ethics document that says we will execute our campaigns with respect and, you know, in all good faithfulness. And so I don't think the current law does anything to protect fraudulent advertising in political campaigns. Like Senator Holscher said, in regular commercial advertising, there's all sorts of regulations. You can't just say whatever you want to say or whatever you want to print about someone. They can sue for libel, they can sue for slander. This bill would actually fix a lot of the problems that we currently have. So if the amendment's going to kill the bill, I don't want to support it, but we need to do something. Thank you.
Senator Holscher.
I do have the question, and maybe this is for Jason. I think you mentioned earlier that the possibility of the amendment infringing on First Amendment rights of the PACs. Is that what you indicated earlier? I'm curious if the monetary fine, if that were adjusted, my guess then is that doesn't infringe on First Amendment rights.
Jason.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, no, a monetary penalty is not as likely to draw a First Amendment challenge because it is not the government acting to stop or otherwise control the speech of a private individual or private entity, which an order to cease campaign activities could entail.
Follow-up, if I may. Are there other penalties or other things that would be potential to utilize that would infringe on First Amendment rights?
Yeah.
At this point, Mr. Chairman, I am not in a position to suggest alternative penalty measures. There were amendments made to the Campaign Finance Act last year that were enacted that limit the types of penalties that the Governmental Ethics Commission can impose for violations of Campaign Finance Act. And so I think a careful review of those recent restrictions would be necessary before any alternative penalties could be looked at or opined on.
Senator Reitman, do you have a question?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jason, for your input. I have to go along with Senator Blasey. I do not like a lot of advertisements come up. I've had some. I've seen some other ones going on. This is a tricky business with the First Amendment rights. And for us to put some kind of punitive damage of that people would think that on cannot continue on for any length of time, I think that's going to be challenged in the courts. And I just think it'd be very difficult for this bill to be passed. I would be against anyone that on that without having a lot more study more than, even though I do honor a lot what Jason says. He's just one person with other people going on. This is a touchy subject. Thank you.
Senator Longmire?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I support the concept of the bill. I realize that something's got to be done, but I'm uneasy about the way the bill is crafted at this point. I think there's some additional work that could be done or should be done. So I'm going to move that we table the bill, and then when enough work has been done that we're comfortable with it, I'll make the motion to untable the bill. But right now, at this point, I think we got some additional work to do. So
Okay.
I move that we table the bill.
Is it motion to table the bill? Is there a second on that, right? Okay, there's a second. Second by Senator Straub. Any further discussion? I will say, I think I agree. We need to look into, what the appropriate measures will be to enforce this. And perhaps it's something as simple as a sliding scale based on how much it costs to produce the AI. The fine could be commensurate with that. I'm not sure. But with that, Senator Straub?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the reviser, maybe in looking into this further, what are the current reasons that the Ethics Commission could, or the Secretary of State's office could deny a political organization from registering? Are there any reasons that you would revoke a lobbying license or PAC registration or anything like that? Are there any other reasons why their application for registration would not be approved?
Jason, and also Elena, if you could look into that as well. Okay, we've had a motion and a second. Oh, Senator Blasey, one more comment?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Real quick question for research or reviser. There was an artificial intelligence bill similar to this in the House that failed on this House floor. Is that correct, last week?
Yes, Senator. House Bill 2559 was amended by the House Elections Committee and advanced to the body of the whole, but it did not pass before the turnaround deadline.
I think it just, that also just backs the hesitancy the legislature might have on, as we navigate this issue, we should be very careful as we navigate First Amendment rights and trying to tackle a very sensitive issue. Thank you.
I'll talk to the House chair and see what kind of resistance they ran into as well. With that, we have a motion and a second to table the bill. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The motion passes. The bill is tabled. Now let's move on and turn our attention to Senate Bill 370, which has to do with the National Heritage Areas. And Jason, if you could give us a quick overview of that one.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Bill 370 would require prior approval by the legislature before certain actions could occur with respect to national heritage areas and national historic trails, a portion of which is located in Kansas. Under the bill, any portion of a national heritage area or historic trail that extended beyond federal land in Kansas would have to be approved by the legislature. Additionally, no matching state funds and no state resources could be used for any national heritage area or historical trail unless approved by the legislature.
Okay. Committee, any questions? And I guess what I was hearing in the hearing is that there was objections to the whereas statements, mostly. And I was going to make a conceptual amendment to just strike all the whereas statements, and that would be basically line 8 to line 34. I believe that would do it, and on page 1, and just start at be enacted by the legislature of the state of Kansas, that those areas would, if they were going to be extended beyond the federal land, they would require a legislative approval. And I think that would remove the objections by the opposition, I believe. I don't think you had time to draw that up, Jason, did you? Yeah.
No, but that description is what you would do, striking all on lines 8 through 34 on page 1 of the bill.
And I would make a conceptual amendment to do that. Any further discussion, or is there a second on that? Second by Senator Cluse. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment say aye. All those opposed, no. The amendment passes. Back on the base bill. Any further discussion on the base bill? Senator Longmire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to support the bill. I've got a number of constituents that seem to be concerned about this, but I do find it redundant because state money is not going to be expended without the approval of the legislature anyway. That's why we have a budget bill. So if we want to put redundancy in, I guess we can, but that's basically what this bill's doing.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, do I have a motion? Senator Blasey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move that we pass out Senate Bill 370 favorably for passage.
As amended.
Sorry, as amended.
That's okay. That was a quick amendment. Do I have a second? Second by Senator Longmire. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The bill passes. We will move on, turn our attention finally to Senate Bill 367. And I'll have Jason remind us about that bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Bill 367 would amend 25-2436, which is known as the Transparency in Revenues Underwriting Elections Act. This would expand the bill in two ways. First, it would specifically prohibit monies that are provided by any branch or agency of the federal government to be used for election purposes, and this, this would be in addition to monies that are provided by private individuals or organizations. And second, the bill would expand the prohibited expenditures, not just the conduct of elections, but also to be used for election-related activities, including voter registration and voter assistance efforts. The penalty for a violation of this is still a level 9 non-person felony.
That's in current law. Committee questions? Senator Faustido.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, could you elaborate on the assistance language in there, assisting people to do what?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that would be assistance to voters in casting their ballots.
Senator Faustido.
So, Mr. Chairman, Jason, so currently, and that's why I need the distinction, so if one goes to the poll to vote, a poll worker can assist them in their voting. to some extent. So are you talking about prior to that?
Mr. Chairman, yes, this is prohibiting monies that are received from private individuals or organizations or from the federal government being used for those election activities. Any monies of the county election office used to conduct voter registration or assist voters would be permissible still as current law.
This wouldn't affect that at all. I do have an amendment on this bill that further clarifies that. And Jason. Thank you, sir. And I'll have you explain it, Jason.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the balloon that was just handed out makes two proposed changes to the underlying bill. The first would be to add a new section of law that any federal agency that is designated as a voter registration agency pursuant to the National Voter Registration Act of 1993 cannot be made except as provided by state law. So there would have to be an act of the legislature, and it would have to be passed into state law in order to make a federal agency a designated voter registration agency. And then it continues that any such designation of a federal agency that was made prior to July 1st of 2024 is declared null and void, and then defines federal agency to mean any branch, department, bureau, office, or instrumentality of the federal government. The second amendment is on line 26, and this states that such expenditures are authorized by acts of appropriation or state law, that the monies that are received from the government can still only be expended for those purposes that were authorized by the federal act that appropriated those monies. So even though state law and a state appropriation authorizes the expenditure of the monies from the federal government, they can still only be spent for those purposes that were authorized by the federal act of appropriation.
Committee, any questions? Senator Holscher?
Jason, what are the implications in terms of this amendment and I'm trying to think how to word this. And funding avenues, I guess, or does this address the issues that were brought up during some of the testimony that we heard from opponents? I'm trying to think it through in my mind, and I guess I'm having a little bit of an issue there.
Jason, if you like, if you know where, yes, sir.
My recollection of the proponent testimony were there were issues raised about the designation of voter registration agencies in the state of Kansas, and so my understanding is the intent of new section 1 in the balloon would be to address those designations specifically, to require them to be approved in state law, and to nullify any prior designations that may have occurred.
Okay, because my understanding is we received millions of dollars through the federal government in regard to Help America Vote Act. And the bill as it is could jeopardize that funding. Does this amendment rectify that or not even address that?
I can kind of answer that. Yeah, I know where you're going. There was never money appropriated by Congress for those federal agencies to engage in the voter registration act. In other words, at the state level. And in fact, there's been a number of senators who have said that it was unconstitutional to do so without the federal, without approval by Congress, and yet they're circumventing that, claiming that the National Voter Registration Act gives the agencies the right to do so, and they're using executive orders to do that rather than going through Congress. So what this does is prevents that money to come into the state without that congressional appropriation for that specific purpose. And that's why it's important, because it is circumventing actual law and may actually be unconstitutional what's happening in the name of the NVRA. So that's why this says basically that no federal agency, and we have agency locations within the state where they are using that money to register voters, but it was never appropriated by Congress. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have concerns with this amendment. Well, I mean, I have concerns with the underlying bill as well, but thank you for that.
Okay. Any further discussion? Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm still trying to work through this. My understanding, as far as election goes, that's supposed to be a state responsibility, not a federal, by a U.S. Constitution, okay? And then it says no state agency should be designated as a voter registration. So, some federal agencies are, like you mentioned, are trying to help for registration of it. And then in B is that it means that since we pass this, we're going to say it's null and void. So we're saying that the state, this would trump the federal then? I mean, as far as the supremacy clause, the federal is supposed to be higher than the state. So I'm really confused about where we can go with this and what's going on. So help me out.
Yeah, but in this case, the state does, by the Constitution, have the right to determine how we do the elections here. The federal money that designated these voter registration agencies at the state level used federal dollars that were not appropriated or not approved by Congress to create that agency as a federal voter registration agency. So we're trying to say that is unconstitutional, and that should be rendered null and void in the state, and any further federal money that comes to us as appropriated by Congress, then we could approve that use at the state level for the specific activity that Congress tells us. So it's not trying to circumvent federal law. We're trying actually to follow the Constitution, of both the federal Constitution and the state Constitution, and just give us legislative oversight over any monies that do come from the federal government. Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you. I agree exactly with all you're saying, but it's not our role to say if something's unconstitutional. That's the courts. So, I mean, that's why I'm having a problem with this.
I don't know, Jason, I think there might be, seems like there is a, hold on a second. I can't find it right now, but I believe there is a constitutional challenge right now. And I'm not sure, Jason would have to look this up, or maybe Elena could look it up, on the EO 14019. That's the executive order. Senator Blasey, do you have information on that?
No, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to say, I think this amendment, if I'm understanding correctly, really is just saying that Congress needs to be authorizing these things, not bureaucratic agencies of the federal government, if that's my understanding. So that's why I will move that we adopt this amendment.
Any further discussion? A second? Second by Senator Straub. Any further discussion? Senator Falscadeau?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jason, could you clarify for me in lines 20 through 26? So who are, so it says no election official. So knowingly, so would this prohibit, like the League of Women Voters, of doing what they do?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, no, election officials are the county and state election officers and employees who conduct election activities in their county or at the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah, except, and it goes on to say on line 22, except as provided in any acts of appropriation or otherwise provided by state law. So that does not prohibit them from doing what they're doing. It just prohibits any federal dollars being spent in the state for any activities without legislative approval or the appropriation from Congress. Elena, do you have further information on that challenge?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. There is a lawsuit currently it was filed on behalf of Pennsylvania legislators, and they are using the independent state legislature theory to challenge Executive Order 14019, which is the executive order from 2021.
Which basically circumvents the appropriation of congressional funds. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second on this amendment. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion carries. We're back on the base bill. Any further discussion? Did you have, Senator Holscher.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I still have major concerns with this bill. Among them that, one of the main proponents is an out-of-state vendor that really is not that familiar with our elections. But my biggest concern is just basically the fact that this bill could bring forward potential lawsuits and put federal funding at jeopardy that has to do with compliance issues. So for those reasons, I won't be supporting the bill. But thank you.
Further discussion? The motion on the amendment was Senator Blasey. Second was Senator Straub. I'm sorry, I went a little too fast. Okay, do we have a motion on the bill? Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move that we move out Senate Bill 367 favorably for passage as amended.
Do I have a second? Senator Straub. We have a motion by Senator Blasey and a second by Senator Straub to move Senate Bill 367 as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. And you can be recorded. The motion carries. And Senator Fausto wants to be recorded. Okay, committee, we got out right on time. We have a hearing tomorrow on SCR 1609. We won't meet on Friday. We will meet on Monday and probably try to work a couple bills there. Yes, Senator Holscher?
I was just going to ask, do you have intention to work any other bills tomorrow?
No.
Okay.
I don't believe so. Yep. And that's it. Thank you, committee.